Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to Card Merchant Nelson YouTube channel. Here we are with a quick little deck tech here, just sort of highlighting the Merlin hybrid fire deck that I brought to the Christchurch Regionals here in New Zealand, and ended up taking first place with it. So going undefeated, just 5 wins. There were 5 rounds of Swiss, won all of them, so it was pretty good. And played against a good, decent variety of decks as well. So we played against, water allies, played against Rye, played against Merlin as well, like a Merlin mirror, and in Solar Rain, which you can actually see on the live stream that I also was broadcasting over on the Geek Culture YouTube channel. So if you're interested in seeing the whole tournament, you can go check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. There's also going to be a link to this deck list in the description below as well, if you just want to go ahead and click on that. But you'll miss out on all the sauce and the spice about how exactly this deck kind of operates, because it is quite a bit of a different one, and I'll show you what I mean in a second if you just stay tuned. So let's jump right into it, shall we? I'll just go through all the cards we have here. So if you're familiar with Yap's Ascent Auckland winning Merlin Decklist hybrid material deck, this will look pretty normal. We got the Spirit of Fire, we got Lorraine level 1, we got Merlin level 2, Merlin level 3, just insane lineage there. But we've also got the Lorraine level 2 and Lorraine Spirit Ruler in there as well. And that is for when you want to, sweep some allies, get lots of card draw, do some good game-winning stuff there against allies. It's pretty good in that scenario. So a little bit of a main deck sideboard there, essentially, which I think is going to be, it's going to be a bit of a theme running forwards in this deck as well. So keep an eye out on that. So Majestic Spirit, yep, we are obviously playing Incarnate Majesty in our deck, so we need that there. Grand Crusader's Ring, yeah, this card's pretty good. You should probably play it if you're not already. Everyone already is. Drawn Blade, pretty staple for warriors. Get to draw a card when you want to play it. Pretty good with Pendragons. Sword of Seeking, our only target for Lorraine level 1. You got to have this in here. It's just so solid. 2 durability, 1 damage. It's just solid. True Sight can help too. Crystal of Empowerment, card's pretty busted. Helps you with your fireballs. Helps you cast Incarnate Majesties easier. And yeah, can be pretty back-breaking and game-winning. And then we have Nullifying Lantern. There's still a few Rending Flames, Fiery Momentum style decks lying around. It can turn off Crux Sight as well if you really want to do that. It does turn your own off, but I guess it can help stop your opponent from doing those shenanigans as well. So yeah, this is really the only, I think, flex slot in the starting material deck. It depends on the meta. I did play against a deck with Rending Flames in it in the finals. That was an Insol Lorraine deck. But to be honest, the Nullifying Lantern wasn't exactly the reason I won that game, so I'm not really sure. You could run, I don't know, you could run main deck Tithe Proclamation. You could probably run Tariff Ring if you want. You could run Chalice of Blood. You could run that as well. So it's all just sort of up to what your meta you feel like will be, but it's good to have some, a bit of insurance against it. I would probably still play it in the sideboard though, even if you weren't playing it main deck. So onto the main deck, speaking of. So just your standard Fire Merlin hybrid deck here, really. You got your Stalwart Shieldmates, Honorable Vanguards, Flame Ring Swordsman, and Fast Cure as your floating memory base. Just 16, nice number, perfect for getting to level 3 super easily. And of course, you can discard all of these. 2 Hasty Messengers and Creative Shock. So these cards, just Wi-Fi is just such a solid and reliable color, just always cycling through your deck, finding the good cards, dumping the floating memory in the yard. And sort of in a similar role, we have Cremation Ritual. These can obviously be used on the Stalwart Shieldmates, Honorable Vanguards, and Flame Rune to put Floating Memory in your yard. And you can also sack the old Dungeon Guide. Dungeon Guide obviously being the card that every level 3 deck needs. That's a 4 of as well. All of these cards are 4 of. Just, yeah. Fireball, pretty standard Merlin card, finisher, can be used as removal in a pinch. Just really solid, and obviously get that major bonus from level 2 is pretty nice. And then we also have Sparklight. So this is the first, I lumped this in with Fireball because it's also a burn spell, essentially. Pretty flexible spell, you got damage, so you can finish off your opponent for the last 3 damage if you need to. You can clear an ally that's a problem for 3 damage. Unpreventable as well, so it can throw people off quite a lot. And it does have some use against Rye decks, because if you play this after they've played a Spell Shield Arcane, it will cause the Spell Shield Arcane to attempt to prevent the Sparklight damage, which will fail because it's unpreventable, and then that will clear the way for all of your other damage that's incoming that they were trying to Spell Shield. So it's pretty solid, and we've got 2 in there. It's one of those like little sideboardish cards in here that it just helps a lot in a few matchups. Cruxite as well, moving on to the Crux cards. 4 of those, really solid. Not recently, but at the Ascent, kind of just learnt the whole engine of Cruxiting for Cruxite. So when you pay the additional 2, you can return a Cruxite to your hand from your graveyard, and then draw a card. And then that Cruxite also draws a card by replaying it, and then if you just loop Cruxites together, you're essentially netting like 4 cards where you didn't originally have. So just really solid engine. It obviously is insane getting back things like Ghost of Pendragon and sometimes Incarnate Majesty if you really need that second horse to dump on the board. So yeah, Ghost of Pendragon, obviously insane card. One of the best cards in the game. Shout out to Levi TCG, that's his hot take. And, just a 2-cost 3/4 beat stick with insane on enter trigger. You want 4 of these for sure. Incarnate Majesty, we are running 3 of these just because it is a little bit clunky if you draw too many of them. But, against some decks, getting out the Majestic Spirit is just game over. And against most other decks, it's deal with this or it is game over. And some decks can deal with it quite easily, or most decks in the meta can anyway, the top meta ones. But some can't, and that's just backbreaking. Moving through to some other more sort of sideboardy-ish cards. We have a suite here, so Sudden Steel, 2 of those. Just a good finisher and really efficient when you get to level 3 and this starts becoming free to play. Flame Sweep, this is your anti-allies card when you need to go into level 2 Lorraine and get this off for like 5 damage to everything, draw multiple cards. It's just insane. And in other matchups it obviously comes out, but we'll get into more of the sideboarding strategies in a minute. Resolute Stand, another card that's pretty strong to certain matchups, but pretty bad to others. It's obviously insane against decks like Ensoul or allies. It can be pretty strong, like keeping your Majestic Spirit alive, things like that, stopping you from dying. Card's obviously insane, and being able to play it for free is just icing on the cake. So we have Scavenging Raccoon in the main deck. I think having 2 Raccoon in a lot of decks is quite solid, especially with a lot of like floating memory and level 3 decks running around that really want to get to that level 3 ASAP. Just having 2 Raccoons sort of gives you that high roll potential where you can kind of, banish a random floating memory that they put in their grave on turn 1 and then just completely throw them off, and they have to spend a real card from their memory to level up to level 1 because, you kind of have to level up or you'll run too far behind. So Scavenging Raccoon, just an amazing 2-for-1 a lot of the time. And then Disintegrate. We have one of a lot. This is the only one in the deck as well. There are a lot of Merlins running around at the moment, and although the meta is going to change a lot very soon, maybe you want more Disintegrates in there. I was tossing up between having more Disintegrate or, you know, less Sudden Steel maybe, or less Sparklights. I ended up on 1 Disintegrate and it was fine. The only matchup you really need it in is Merlin Mirror. And you can do without it most of the time anyway, like a horse can just die to a big Fireball or a big Sudden Steel or something like that, and a few other cards combination. So Disintegrate isn't essential for killing the Majestic Spirit, but it does help. And it did come up once or twice in the tournament that I just happened to have the Disintegrate when the Majestic Spirit came down, which was quite nice. So as you can see, kind of this main deck is just a bit of an all-rounder. It has a bit of something for every matchup. And you'll be thinking, well, surely there's too much sideboard cards in here. Like, if you draw Flame Sweep in the mirror, it's pretty bad. If you draw it in the Rye matchup, it's terrible. Same with Resolute Stand, you don't really like that in the mirror. Rye matchup, it's terrible. Scavenging Raccoon's pretty bad against allies, it's pretty bad against Rye. And sort of similar with Disintegrate, it's only really good against the mirror. So what are you going to do? And I mean, Sparklight's solid most of the time, but it's better in some matchups like allies than in others. So all these cards here, I essentially call them, this is my sideboard. And when you go into a matchup and you kind of go, wait, I really don't want to be drawing against Rye, you don't want to be drawing Resolute Stand, you don't want to be drawing Flame Sweep. Scavenging Raccoon, I mean, you don't want that either, really. Disintegrate's kind of average as well. So what are we going to be boarding out? And that's a lot of cards to be boarding out, right? Same in the material deck as well, like Lorraine, level 2 and 3. You probably don't want that in the mirror, and you probably don't want that against Rye and such. Like, this is only for ally decks, and only sometimes like against a Water Allies deck on the weekend, I did actually go in the Merlin line as well, because they were being conservative, and rightly so. They didn't want to get flame swept, so just go into Merlin and then start getting value on them. So that was pretty good as well. So when you have all these cards that you don't want in the matchup, what do you do? And the answer, down below in the sideboard, we have 1 Tithe Proclamation, 1 Prismatic Edge, 4 Spirit Blade Ascension, 1 Favorable Winds, and 1 Refracting Missile. So you can kind of see, I mean, you might be catching on just exactly how the strategy for this deck's sideboard kind of goes. So, I mean, Tithe Proclamation, you obviously love that against Rye. It can slow them down by maybe a turn sometimes, which can be big, you know. You get that extra turn, you might get lethal on them before they get it on you. Prismatic Edge, paired up with Spirit Blade Ascension, you know, it's like you're a fire deck, so you're going to get that 3 damage off of Prismatic Edge. And then we also have a little bit of the so-called Skittles package in here as well. So 1 Favorable Winds, 1 Refracting Missile, just to get that water and wind element down in there. Because let's face it, you're playing against probably all fire decks most tournaments. You're going to need these cards to turn on the majority of the modes of Prismatic Edge. I did play against one water deck, but obviously in that case you just bought in the Favorable Winds and don't worry about the Refracting Missile. So the main strategy of this deck, and I guess this is a side effect of the sideboard being so small, like it's only 8 cards. You really don't have enough room to have a sideboard for every matchup. So the idea in this deck is you have your sideboard in the main, and then in most matchups you have about 6 cards you want to board out, and then you bring in these 6 cards: Ascension, Prismatic, Favorable, and Refracting Missile. Replace those cards, because Ascension combo with Prismatic Edge, it's pretty solid. It's pretty much like, once you get there, and I know it's pretty greedy to have pretty much post board, you're going to have nearly 15 cards crux in your deck, and that might throw you off in some games. But let's be honest, Fire's so good at cycling and, you know, getting problematic cards out of your hand that most of the time it's not going to be an issue. If you draw too many crux cards, just banish them or discard them. Like, they're all good cards, but you don't have to hold on to them for dear life. once you get to the end game level 3, you're going to find more, and they're all good. They're all insane when you play them. So losing a couple isn't such a bad thing. So getting to 15 Crux cards is not the end of the world. Your deck runs fine. So like with the sideboarding plan, say I'm playing into Rye. So Fire Rye, Arcane, you want to race them. You don't want Flame Sweeps. You don't want Resolute Stands. Raccoon's pretty bad as well, but we don't have enough actual space to take those out. But anyway, we're bringing in the 4 Ascensions, the Favorable and the Refracting, boarding out these 6 cards, Flame Sweep and Resolute. And then into the material deck, obviously Prismatic Edge and Tithe Proclamation would go in, and then Lorraine's would come out. And then you just got a Merlin deck with a Merlin Prismatic Skittles deck. Similar into the mirror, pretty much. Similar sideboarding with that as well in the mirror. Same cards go in and out. Into allies, you would want to board out stuff like Scavenging Raccoon, Disintegrate. Sudden Steel's not amazing in that matchup either, so I'd probably take that out as well. So that's 5 cards. So you'd bring in the Ascensions, and depending on what allies deck it is, it's either wind or water, so you bring in one or the other, depending on, bring in the opposite of what they are. And then the Prismatic Edge would come in for the nullifying in that situation. You don't really need Tithe Proclamation in that matchup, and you pretty much want both your lineages in there just in case you can go into Merlin if you're not being pressured too much, so keep both lineages in. And yeah, so that's the general idea of the deck. And it worked out pretty well, I'd say. As I said earlier in the video, I played against Merlin Mirror round 1. I ended up losing game 1 and then boarded in the Ascension package. They didn't have Ascension package in their deck, so once I found Favorable Winds, Refracting Missile, and just back-to-back Ascensions for Prismatic Edge, that was just game over. That happened 2 games in a row. And then played into a Water Allies deck. This deck kind of just runs over Water Allies anyway. Game 1 was pretty much a steamroll, and then game 2 brought in the Ascension and the Favorable, and then just got to do the same thing again. And Flame Sweep obviously being a insane line in that deck. Then I played against 2 Ryes in a row. The Rye matchup is still pretty hard. I did end up 2-0ing the first one. They stumbled quite badly. So not much of a game there to speak of, but round 4 was pretty tough. It went to a game 3, but in that game 3, I did manage to play 4 Spirit Blade Ascensions in the same turn for lethal in combination with Crux Sight, which was pretty insane. I wish I'd caught that one on camera. But the one I did catch on camera was the Lorraine and Soul deck, which can be tricky. They can get massive damage out of nowhere on you, but if you play smart, you can just hide behind your Incarnate Majesties and Resolute Stands, and Nullifying Lantern can help too, so that was fine. That went alright. Obviously, Spirit Blade Ascension, insane value in that matchup as well. So the question is, I found, with me finding Spirit Blade Ascension so good in all of those matchups, why am I not just main decking it? And why am I not just running a few of these cards in the sideboard instead, and I can just board them in? Problem is, I want to be a bit more diverse in my card pool in the main deck. The idea of being able to have your sideboard main deck and then taking out the bad cards, putting in the good cards, I think is a pretty solid, sort of, I guess, idea for a deck building strategy in Grand Archive. Unless they make the sideboard a little bit bigger, I think it's a really good way of building some decks going forward. I don't think every deck is going to want to have just their sideboard being good card, like their sideboard just being a good package, or just good cards that you might want for any matchup. But in a deck like Fire Merlin, where you have such insane draw power, you have good filtering, like if you draw a sideboard card that's not good in game 1, that you don't want, you just discard it, or you can use it for memory. It's kind of just, how you would use any other sort of average card in any game. So I think, in a way, I would consider this the way to, like, if you're going to build a mid-range deck, I would consider building a deck in this way going forward. Just have your main deck options super broad and try and spread your matchup rating as much as possible game one, and then have a solid way of just boarding out your bad cards and just bringing in something that's just generally solid. So I hope you kind of enjoyed this little idea that I had, and obviously somewhat proven in a reasonably sized regionals, and obviously did get the fast cure promo, so I will be in Melbourne, and maybe I'll bring something a little bit similar to this potentially. You never know. I do think Merlin does have insane legs. Obviously, the new set's coming out. There's going to have to be something pretty insane to throw Merlin off of her perch at the moment. She's just so solid and has an insane engine. I know there's a lot of good Umbra cards out there, though, that can sort of challenge her power, but I think Merlin, being a very strong contender for a week one deck, I would definitely consider a deck like this going forward. There are probably a few cards you can slot in from the new set, but there wouldn't be much change, I would say, at this point. So I hope you all enjoyed, and if you want to see similar decks text like this one, if you want to learn more about Merlin, obviously let me know in the comments. And yeah, subscribe to the Card Merchant Nelson channel, and also the Geek Culture one while you're at it, because they put out lots of streams. They'll be putting out more in the future. It's going to be an exciting time for coverage as well. So thanks all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.